Ask the Podcast Coach for January 25th, 2025.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, brought to you today by Sudafed. And joining me right over there is Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Sorry that you're sick again. Good to have you back from Podfest, right? Good, but those kinds of things. Do you think you picked it up? That's always like conferences are always sketchy, right?
It's kind of weird because it didn't kick in. I got home on Sunday, and this started about Thursday. Thursday, I had a little sniffy nose, and then Friday was like you wake up and your eyes are floating in hot water kind of thing. And I was just like, this is no fun. And then today, I feel a little bit of my Aura ring told me I have less symptoms. Because yesterday it was like, hey, guess what? You're sick. And I'm like, really? No crap, buddy. It was like, but it's the thing that's really, it's a mental thing. I had all these plans for 2025 to hit the ground running. And, first I get COVID, knock that out the door, go to Podfest, come back. And I was like, I have things that I wanted to do that I put off, and so.
Yeah. Well, don't be discouraged. Just write January off. We're close to the end anyways. Write it off and just start over again in February.
Yeah,
right?
that's it. But right now my throat is a little sketchy. I have no upper range. So when I went, hey, anything up here is just gone. But what might help it though, is of course a steaming cup of hot Java. And that particular coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need really kind of anything, whether it's artwork, if you need a website, if you need a PDF for a lead magnet, if you need anything that you're going to give to the public, well, Mark's the guy that you want to talk to. He makes really pretty stuff. It's just gonna make you look professional. Really is the bottom line there. If you're worried about how you're gonna look in front of people, Mark is the guy to go to. And the beautiful thing that you're not gonna get with every graphic artist is Mark's a podcaster, so he gets it. He understands podcasting, and you don't have to give him the idea. You just, hey, here's my show. We're kind of light and bouncy. Maybe a little idea what the flavor of the show is. He's gonna go check out your show, check out your website, and make sure your brand fits your show, and he'll give you a couple different options. Sometimes you just get, one, here's your artwork. No, Mark's going to give you a couple to pick from, and I've been lucky. Every time he sends me a couple, one of them I'm like, that's the keeper right there. So when you're ready to go, there's only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co.
And of course, big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. Because we were off last week, by the way, for those folks, thanks for giving us a week off. Dave's at Podfest. We'll talk about that more here a little bit later. But because we took a week off, Dan got 2 new episodes out. One based on the movie 13 Days. So you might want to check that one out. That's about all those things that went on during the Cuban Missile Crisis and during the Kennedy administration here in the United States. And then if you're in a World War II guy or gal, Battle of the Bulge. And we're not talking about the midsection. We're talking about 1945 during World War II, the Battle of the Bulge, out there now. And check those out. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship. Dave, you're familiar with Battle of the Bulge, right? You know what happened. I don't.
No? I've heard it, first reaction was like, is that a porn? Like, no, it's okay.
No.
All right.
No, and it has nothing to do with us old guys, when we get old, right? But, in 1945, the Germany takes one more attempt to kind of, it's the world is closing in, and they make one more attempt to kind of push through the Western lines. And of course, we know now with history that was unsuccessful, but lots of drama there, lots of movies made about that. And so,
interesting.
For enthusiasts, for World War II historians, let's not say
it.
Nobody's enthusiast about war, right? But for historians, it's a big historical event.
Yeah, Randy says, I'm still crying that we're not having Podcaster Happy Hour, which is supposed to be next Monday. And the thing is, even if I'm better on Monday, I'm so far behind. I'm like, And it's weird because
You
on
want to
one
switch us
hand,
back? You want to switch
oh,
us back?
oh, that would be good. Thank you.
That's okay.
It's
There
the
we go.
Sudafed. Not that
I'm
Dan doesn't
sure it
need,
is.
like everybody, let's just look at Dan's logo for an hour and a half. Yes,
Well,
Dan
we
would.
we did skip him last week,
Yeah, that's
and Mark
true.
too. So we should,
That's right.
give them
Yes,
some
we'll just randomly
extra.
show our
Yeah, there we go.
sponsors here this week. Yeah, that's it. But yeah, so I just was thinking about Monday and the people I thought I would find somebody at Podfest because we always podcaster happy hour, podcasterhappyhour.com. Right now it's just a newsletter, and I tell people, hey, we're having a Zoom meeting. And the people I wanted to talk to at Podfest weren't there. That was an interesting thing. There were some people like BSW, not there. Podbean, not there. I was like,
Really?
yeah.
They're usually
Yeah, they're always there. And
Huh.
I thought I heard somebody say that, and I forget their names. The one woman always had bright orange hair. And then the other guy I liked, I forget his name, but he was a guitar player. So we would always talk guitars. And somebody said they're no longer with the company. I went, oh, so that's interesting. But
Yeah,
the fun
things
thing,
change.
yeah, the fun thing at Podfest was I was manning the booth for Podpage, and the first thing is right. I get this big box of a booth, and like the world's worst IKEA instructions ever to put this. And the whole time I'm like, because it's all based on tension. You pull your banner tight and blah blah. And I'm a guitar player. I like my fingers, and I'm trying to stretch things over the edge of stuff. And I just kept telling myself, this is the learning curve. Enjoy the learning curve. The next time you do this, you won't have to do this. But that was the fun part. But I started off. They released the hounds, and everybody comes into the vendor area, and I'm facing three people, and then there's kind of two people behind them. And the first person looks at me and goes, so what's a pod page? And I was like, and I went to answer, and the two people standing next to him were customers of Podpage, and they're like, "Oh, it's the best thing ever. It's I've been with them for 3 years and blah blah blah." And I was like, about that time, Brendan texted me because I'm just kind of standing there, kind of shipping in where there's a place, and Brendan's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I'm like, "We just opened, and I'm watching our customers sell our product to future customers." And he's like, "All right, you can go home." And I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of it." So it was a lot of fun though. The other thing that
any puppies or beer or
it was
any of those kinds of gimmicks.
There was a pen of one puppy, and I think it was somebody had a booth and just wanted to bring their dog. There were a couple dogs at the event. I don't know if it's the old emotional what's
emotional
that
support.
Yeah, because I always want to bring my emotional support giraffe. But there's a problem.
Now, come on.
Yeah,
you never get it on the plane. Let's just be clear.
And I got fun words from Jeff. Jeff says Dave's session at Podfest was excellent. One of the best of the conference. Holy cow. Not blowing smoke, really. What I did, and you'll hear it in the next episode, assuming I have a voice of the School of Podcasting, but it was all about editing. And so and not so much like what tools, but like what do you keep and what do you lose? And I thought, you know what, this is going to have a ton of questions. So I think the session was supposed to be 30 minutes with 10 minutes of questions. And I made my presentation like 20. I clocked it in at 20 and then figured I would add stuff as I always do on the fly. And I did. So, but yeah, George Schraub was a guy that I got to induct into the Hall of Fame. I've known George for probably 19 years at this point. And I saw him, he's like, "Hey man, your session was good." And I'm like, "Thanks." And he's like, "No, he goes, "I've seen a few." And he goes, is there a rule about selling from the stage?" And I go, "Yeah." I go, "If you noticed, I barely mentioned that Podpage had a survey tool." I go, "Because I don't even want to sniff that topic." And he's like, "Well, somebody didn't get the memo." He's like, "I've attended a few of these." And he's like, "Holy cow." And I'm like, "Well, that's interesting. I'll have to let Chris know." But yeah, it was fun. The other thing that was interesting, I always do a thing now at the beginning of my sessions where I turn around and take a selfie and I go, "If you have no idea who I am," I go, "My ego is not bruised. I just need to know that this is the first time you're seeing me." And what was kind of good and kind of bad was, I don't know, maybe 5 people. Almost everybody in there knew who I was, which is good to have your friends there. But it was fun, and that was good. The fun part was, again, I was running the booth, and it was like I looked down. I'm like, oh crap, I'm talking in 15 minutes. So I grab my stuff, run down the hall, do my presentation. That was on Friday. Then I run back, work the booth for a couple hours. Oh, time for Hall of Fame ceremony, dress rehearsal. Run back to the thing. It was a lot of running there. So that was always kind of fun. But Jeff says 30 minutes for a session is, it needs to be
That's tough.
longer.
It's
It's
tough.
tough.
Yeah,
And that's
tough.
writing anything shorter is a pain in the butt. As much as you're like, wait, because here's the thing. I got to induct, I was honored to induct George Robb from geologicpodcast.com. Really entertaining show. If you are a person that is offended by people that don't believe in God, don't listen to that show, because George is a stout skeptic. But, I made a joke in my presentation. I said, now, why do I listen? Because one of the things George says at the beginning of a show, you'll hear interesting fauna, Rupert McClanahan's Indestructible Bastards. And then he says, not the Bible. So what are you going to hear on George's show? Not the Bible.
Good
And
for
I said, why do I listen to it? And I said, because I'm not a skeptic. I go, because George also has a segment that's called the Religious Moron of the Week. And I just got to make sure it's not me, But I've known George for 19 years, and I've known Tom Webster. I got to induct Tom Webster. And here's another guy that has done so much. And I was like, so I had originally it was 1 to 2 minutes to like kind of explain why this person is awesome and why they deserve to be here. And I told Rob Greer, I go, is it really just 1 to 2 minutes? He's like, yeah, he goes, we're inducting more people this year. So and I was like, and then later he said, okay, 2 to 3 minutes. But even that. And so like the first time I just brain dumped on George Robb and read it was 9 minutes long. And I was like, oh, and I really had to sit there and think, okay, what's the big thing that makes George Robb? And I was like, this dude is super creative, and so that was basically it. I ended it by saying, I don't care how many quantum computers you make and how much AI there is, you're not going to make a George Robb, because the guy's just, you think I do voices. This guy has tons of dialects, and, the thing I love, like his family's from Ukraine. So when that whole war kicked on, you got a whole new perspective on that. And then Tom Webster, of course, has been, measuring podcasting.
For sure.
Forever. I asked him, I go, were you at the thing in Ontario, California in 2006? And he's like, yeah. And I go, I just remember Todd, and we were using the PA system. So we're in a dimly lit hotel room. There's an open bar and about 50 to 80 podcasters. This is 2006. So open bar and podcasters is usually not a good combination. And Todd is talking into this PA system that's coming through the speakers in the ceiling. So it has the clarity of a broken McDonald's drive-through, speaker. And Tom gets up to give his report. And my punchline was, and that was the first time I almost heard Tom Webster, because it was just literally Charlie Brown just was like, okay, just like, yeah. So it was like, it wasn't always glamorous, folks. So, John says, George doesn't have an invisible sky buddy. No, but the cool thing is he doesn't care that I do, and I don't care that he doesn't.
Yeah, right on.
We kind of know, that I know that that, and if I ever have questions, I could go ask him, and if he has questions, he could ask me. So yeah, it was fun. It was a good time, but that was, I obsess over that when I did Daniels last year. And the thing I loved about it is I'm 4 sentences in, and I forget what it was. I was supposed to say there, and I said your or something. I got one word a little left to center, and I just fixed it. I was like, well, and it blew them out of your socks. I mean, their socks, and just went on. And I was like, okay, it's not perfect. You can relax now. It's just, and so it was fun. Jessica Kupferman. I was so bummed that Jessica was not there. Nobody really knows, but it was something, the rumor, so take this for what it's worth, was Elsie was going, which makes sense. Elsie was going to induct her. Jessica, one of the driving forces behind She Podcasts, which has, 80 million people in their Facebook group and things like that. And there was something where Elsie couldn't make it, so Jessica was like, well, if Elsie can't make it, I'm not going. That was the rumor. I have no idea if that's true. I just know we were all dying to see her. Now, she did a video. They both did videos which was great. But I really just wanted to give her a big giant hug and say congrats. But yeah, that was fun. But in terms of best swag of the show, it was so cool. I should have brought mine here. Buzzsprout had a laser etcher, and what it is, they basically had these keychains with kind of a teardrop. You've seen your typical keychain. And what they would do is he would pull up your album artwork on a computer and etch it in the leather keychain.
Nice.
And it was like, that was cool. And I asked Kevin, who's one of the founders of Buzzsprout, I go, is this a case where Kevin bought a fun tool and brought it here so he could expense it?
Yes, exactly what happened. Yeah.
He's like, you should be an accountant. So,
yeah.
But the thing that I'm hearing, though, is number one, this always happens. New people, like I just started my podcast, or I'm thinking of starting a podcast. They come in and it's just a fire hose, right? So the word you always hear is overwhelm. And I always tell people, if they like, man, there's just I'm like, hey, just for the record, that's normal. Like if you're thinking everybody else is like got everything, I'm like, no. All the new people here are overwhelmed. And then the Jeff C's of the world, the Nancy May, all these people have been doing it for a few years. They're kind of there for the networking, but that's the thing where I think they have a pro track where people who are doing this for a living. And I hear that's a great track, but that kind of sounds like they need to have more of that content available to people who don't want to spend for another ticket. Yeah. So that's the thing I've heard, because people are like, well, I didn't really learn anything new, but like the thing I ran into was opportunities to maybe collaborate. I don't know if that might be too strong of a word, but basically things Podpage could do with other companies. Basically swap kind of stuff. I did see there was a booth across from me, really nice guy, whose name I can't remember, of course, but Podstars, I believe it's PODSTARZ.com. If that's not it, it's an S. And what's interesting, I barely looked at their site, but they have things like wrestlers. It's kind of like, what if Podmatch had a baby with Cameo, right? So not like super duper celebrities, but you're like, oh, I remember that guy. And so you can pay to have B-list celebrity on your show. And I said, oh, wow, that's interesting. And I go, now, do you teach your customers that they need to, disclose that per the FTC? And he was not aware of that rule or not. And I'm like, oh yeah, I go, if somebody's getting paid to be on your show, I go, it's pretty clear. Any kind of way that somebody's benefit, you got to disclose that up front. And he was like, huh. So that was, but I haven't checked out their site yet. So I'll have to see. I know there's a new one, talks.co. And this one's different because, yes, it's a place where guests and, hosts can kind of match up. But they also said there were events, because I said, I have a hard time finding events. I know I forget the guy that, helps you be a paid speaker, but they're all like, oh, go talk to colleges. I'm like, I don't think colleges want to hear me talk about podcasting for 30 minutes. So that's the one thing I'm kind of looking for: marketing events, things like that. But it's the Joe Pardo's not doing his thing. The one in Washington Podfest, or no, I forget the one in Washington. That was cool. A lot of them have kind of gone the way of the dodo. Jeff C says, not a fan of the pro track. People come to rub shoulders with their podcast heroes, which takes a lot of them out of the first day. Ooh, yeah, that's not good. That's the thing I always tell people. I'm like, if you're going there to do interviews, that may not be the thing people want to do, to take an hour out of, like, I came here to network with people and now I'm in a booth. Although I got to say, Ecamm, which we're using right now, they had this giant room and they had these little, almost like little baby houses that people could go in and record interviews. So that was cool. Let's see. Tanner, I think, has a question. I still need new glasses. I do a how-to podcast for ghost hunting and paranormal topics. I want to do premium content with an exclusive show, PDFs and discount. What's the best platform? Well, Tanner, you've hit the nail on the head because here's the fun thing. Now that people have been podcasting for a month, the question is, let me go down to this. It is basically, let me share my screen. Somebody asked about Buy Me a Coffee. And they're like, hey, it doesn't have any advertising. I don't know how Buy Me a Coffee makes money because they charge like 2.9% plus 30 cents. I'm like, that's the credit card processing fee, unless they are behind the scenes, their own credit card of some way. But there's no like monthly fee, and it's no like we take, 10%. It's not like Patreon. And then somebody also asked, how far into your podcast do you get before introducing Patreon? So the questions we're getting now are, okay, I've been doing this for a month. It's a lot work. Oh, now Tanner said he's been doing this for a while, but I've been doing this a while, and how do I make money at this thing? And so nobody likes any of my answers, but when I did my research for the book, profit from your podcast.
Wait a minute. You've written a book? Really?
Profitfromyourpodcast.com, proven strategies to turn listeners into a livelihood, where according to the front page, I interviewed 70 podcasters to give their best advice and insights. And to make what I think in the book, I called it car payment money, was about 3 years. So that's that. And then the thing that nobody likes is that it takes about, you're going to get, if you're really, really, really good, 3%. Yes, there we go. Look at him.
I'm looking it up.
I'm looking it up
right now. Hold on. I'm looking it up right now.
But it's like 3% of your audience. So my favorite right now, is Jim, it's a podcast question. So how am I going to start this answer?
It depends.
It depends. Yes. So it depends, because I know like Patreon, you can do gift cards, you can do, merchandise, you can do all sorts of stuff, and so if you want to do that, Patreon, but they're going to take, I think it's 12%, if I remember right. And it depends on how much you're charging. I love Supercast, because Supercast, they take 59 cents per person plus whatever the process. I don't know if they count the processing fee, but anyway. So if you're charging $5, well, that's roughly 10%, maybe a little more. But it's super easy. With Patreon, when somebody signs up, if they want to listen to your stuff, they're either going to download the Patreon app, or they've got to do the old copy the RSS and paste it into your favorite app. And that can be an absolute nightmare depending on who your audience is. So I like Supercast because all I'm doing is giving premium content. So in the case of the awesome supporters, they get a ad. I shouldn't say ad less. There are less ads in that version than there are in this, because I still thank the awesome supporters, but I usually insert one or two little baby ads that are like 15 seconds long into the public version. And if you're an awesome supporter, you don't get those. So, but in terms of when do I start doing this, as always, it's your show. Do what you want. The thing I hate to see, though, is people start off. It's hard. You're going through that learning curve, and you're like, man, this is taking forever. It's harder than I thought. And then you get your, first 2 episodes out, and you got 32 downloads, and you're like, wait, I got 35 people in my family. Like, grandma's not listening. And so that's disheartening. And then you're like, oh, and I'm not making any money. And that's the thing I hate, is now you're gauging 2 things: my downloads, and I'm not making any money. And it's that I'm not making any money thing that can really just, after, 7 episodes, you're like, I've done this for 7 episodes and I'm not making any money. I don't even have 1. And I'm like, well, that's because you're up to 54 downloads. Times that by 3%, it's not even a person yet. And that's if you're really, really good. And so as much as I should be saying, oh, start a podcast and money will fall from heaven and blah, 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 for 3 easy payments, I will show you how. I'm like, no, that's kind of not the truth. It's, so I would say, look at Supercast, look at Patreon. A fair amount of people already know Patreon. they're kind of the Kleenex of group funding kind of thing. But I like Supercast. And then the other thing you have to do, I just did an episode about this on the Your Podcast Consultant show. You got to let people know. I mean, it's always a joke, right? When I hold this up, Jim goes, "You have a book?" But I remember I do a show with Eric K. Johnson called the Podcast Review Show. And no joke, I was talking about something and I said, "Oh, I remember when I was doing that with my book." And he goes, "Wait, you have a book?" And I go, "Yeah, Profit from Your Podcast." And he's like, "I've never heard you talk about it." And part of it is, and for the record, this next paragraph will be in a member, it's going to be in the School of Podcasting. Because I came up with something and I was like, "Ooh, that's clever." But we get stuck on the call to action because we feel like a salesy, used car salesman. And I always say to people like, "Oh, so that guy's selling you a bucket of bolts," and they'll go, "Yes." And I go, "So you're saying your podcast is a bucket of bolts?" And they're like, "No, I worked like 10 hours on that." And I'm like, "Okay, so it's helpful then." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm pretty, yeah, I think so, yeah." I'm like, "So why are you stopping yourself from helping people?"
Mhm.
It's but I thought about even just the phrase call to action. When I hear the phrase call, part of me, you're calling after somebody, or maybe you're a slimy construction guy in New York. "Hey, baby, what's going on?" Right, you're calling people, and then action is sometimes shouted at you from a director, like, "You will take action, do your thing." I'm like, okay, so instead of call to action, think of it as a nudge to value. Like, it's
Mhm.
not a call to action; it's a nudge to value. But if you don't tell
Totally.
people, that you've got this thing, and if you want to support the show, you can. Nobody's going to do it. It is not I'll just throw a PayPal button on the website. Well, most of the people that listen to your show don't go to your website. They're listening in Apple Podcasts or whatever, things like that. But I know if you start promoting that on episode 1, as long as nobody's going to sign up, it gets the audience in the what's the word, in the routine of hearing you promote this, so that when you finally get enough people to, you're like, "Hey, if I could get 3% of 1,000 people, now that I've built my audience," because you don't monetize a podcast, you monetize an audience. And so you've built an audience now that if you get 3% of them, you're like, "Oh, that's a car payment." Um, that's when, in theory, like, you should maybe start to expect. But even that, I've had people, because in the book I talk about 3 years, and I'll have people come on like, "Hey, it's been 3 years, so I'm ready to monetize." And I'm like, "Well, how many downloads are you getting in an episode?" And they're like, 112. And I'm like, okay, so that's maybe 3 people. It's tough. I hate to be, and by all means try it. But that's why the somebody asked that in Reddit, and I said, this is just one of many income streams. Like, it's not the only one. It doesn't have to be just Patreon. It could be Patreon and affiliate marketing and this and this and that. So I don't know. Thoughts, Jim? When should people try to monetize?
No, well, let me go back to the original question of those platforms. I think you nailed it from what's available out there. I always hesitate. This is in the YouTube slash guru culture we live in now. The one answer of this is the one to go with, and then you find out that YouTube is
Yeah,
sponsored by them. The
yeah,
YouTuber was sponsored by them or whatever. So it's hard. I appreciate you always giving a couple different answers along those lines. Yeah, I dig into a couple. I think you mentioned a few of those, and I so good work on that. I think from a monetization standpoint, and I know you give the 3 years, and I think that's an average. It can be faster. Trust me, there are people who've gotten out there who've made it go fast. They've done a lot of work. They got a little lucky. They do some stuff and get it done. It can go faster. It can be longer. And there's only
yeah,
so much attention in the space. If you're jumping into I'll use me as an example. If you're jumping into the tech space, although this space is kind of, a lot of folks have exited this space, but if you a couple years ago you jump into the tech space, everybody was doing tech podcasts then. It's a very crowded space. You're going to have, you're going to be competing with a lot of people. If you're jumping into a more of a niche, yeah, the audience is smaller, and I say this all the time, but those that you do find are going to be much more engaged because you're scratching the itch, right? You're getting down to the brass tacks. You're hitting right there in the sweet spot. So as you think through that piece, you know, you're like, hey, am I a small fish in a big pond, or am I just still that small fish in a smaller pond? Right. And that's okay too, because, you know, but depending upon what your goals are and what you're hoping for with this thing, that can work as well. So, you know, yeah, 3 years is a good is good, Dave. It could go faster if you, depending upon you, depending on your situation, what you do, what you hit, who works, how'd it go, where'd you get? Did you get some luck? Did you get a break? Did somebody mention you? You know, some of those kinds of things. The key, I think, in all of this is just to make sure your motivations are lined up. You know, sometimes we say, well, you gotta love this. I don't know if you have to love it. You just have to have the right motivations for it. I know a lot of people who do a lot of things they don't love, but the motivation of a financial reward for it is large enough that they put the feelings aside for a moment and like, well, yeah, the payout's pretty good on this thing. I think I'll figure out ways to put up with it, right? Is that sustainable? I don't know. You make the call on that one as far as how that works, but I do think it can go faster. It just go to wrap that up, that segment. It just
Yeah.
depends, right? Depends on
Yeah.
you.
And
You
then,
listen. You can work hard at this and it goes nowhere. You can do nothing at this and it goes everywhere. Why that happens, I don't know. Sometimes the universe just blesses you, and it just, for some people, listen, John Lee Dumas could have gone nowhere with that. He could have tried that format, and it would have gone nowhere. Now it did. Now you're like, yeah, but Jim, it did. Well, okay, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion now because hindsight's 2020. But I'm sure for every one John Lee Dumas, there is 10 people who tried the exact same thing and it
oh,
didn't have the
there were
same
at
success,
least, at least I
right?
think it was 26 shows that tacked on fire. Me and Steve Stewart had a shared um, spreadsheet, and it was literally like librarians on fire. It was just everything,
Yeah.
you
Well, and I'm
know.
not talking about copycats. I mean, I'm just talking about someone who tried a
Oh yeah,
daily
yep,
that wasn't the first he wasn't the first one to do that. He was just the first one to be successful at it. And so we know him because, you know, history is written by the victors. And
yeah,
so we know, and you're like, oh, well, if I just do everything he did, well, maybe, but maybe not, because there was a lot of other things that went well for him. Rogan is another, you know, if we're gonna pick on, you know, big podcast examples. There's other celebrities who've had other things happen to them that tried to do this, and they've been mildly successful just because they've
right.
had mild success in some of the things they've done in other areas. Why did Rogan go? Why is he have the success he had? Could you copy him and get the same success? Probably not.
No,
Probably.
I cherry picked some episodes from Joe. One of them was Julian Lennon, because I'm a Beatles fan, and this is the kid of a Beatle, and I'm like, I'm going to check this out, and I'm here to tell you, I almost hit stop at 55 minutes because I was bored,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
big time bored.
Yeah.
I learned that Julian knows where the best pasta is in Monaco, and that his mom married a nice guy. I don't care. I don't really care. And it's kind of weird with that guy because you want to talk about his dad, but you don't want to just like ignore the fact that there's a person in front of you that probably is interesting too. But at the hour and 7 minute mark, he said, my dad always told me if something happens to me and I want to let you know everything is okay, I will do it with a white feather. Okay. Then he tells an amazing white feather story. And I'm like, why is it at the hour and 7 minute mark? You made me wait an hour and 7 minute mark for something I'm now going to tell my friends. You got to go listen to this. But I had to sit through 58, an hour and 106 minutes of, I couldn't believe it. The chat room's been going crazy. So,
Yeah. We've ignored a few of their questions. We can
yeah, I'm
probably.
sorry, guys. Let's see. This one I'll talk about in a second. What would I change about Podfest? That's always fun. Bite the hand that feeds you, Dave. Yes, but Craig says I'd like to see more online workshops. I can't afford across the Atlantic. Yeah, I mean, anytime, because I know Craig was at Podcast Movement once or twice. I remember one time we roomed together. It was great. But that's anytime I see anybody, like Mark and Kieran from Captivate were there. That's not cheap. And it's really taxing on your body. But they came over for a week. They hung out at Podfest and then they were going to go golfing because they love to golf. There again, you spend money on a hobby. But Tim lets me know the Empowered Podcast Conference is in June, Charlotte, North Carolina. Last year was the first year. And I totally forgot, Dr. Brad Miller has podindy.com. He said, I'd love some way to connect with other live events. I want to network and learn from those folks. There is a Michael Stelzner interview on, I forget what show, but he gave all the behind the scenes of social media marketing world and talked about how he does. Now his tickets are much more expensive, but he doesn't rely on sponsorship. The other thing that I would say to anybody doing an event, you can't start promoting 2 months before it starts. And, I would look at Podcast Movement. I look at Podfest. I look at their websites because that's the other thing. Your first impression is huge. And so you got to, and make it easy. I mean, I talked to Rob about this. You have to buy a ticket to get into the Hall of Fame ceremony. And if I went looking, like somebody said, how do I buy a ticket? And I was going to send them a link. I was like, oh, I finally found it, but it was not, should have been on the front page. Click here and buy your ticket now. And I was like, what, who's doing that? So that was a little crazy. Back to the Patreon question, Dan said, I introduced Patreon when I had someone ask me if I could set one up so they could support me. Yeah, George Robb was a guy that his audience was like, look, George, you're an amazing musician. He's a fantastic drummer. And they said, we bought all your CDs. He even put out some sort of coloring book. And they're like, yeah, we bought that. For the love of God, can you throw up a PayPal button? And then Uncle Marv let me know, Buy Me Coffee does make money by charging 5% on all transactions. So there you go. And also Patreon has a 5%, 8%, or 12%. So it depends again on what you're doing over there. Substack, DR says, here's the funny thing about Substack. I went over to play with it and put in a dollar amount to like sponsor me for a year, and like woke up the next day and somebody done that. And I was like, oh, well, now I got to do this, I guess. All right. But also Substack, Ross Brand, one of our awesome supporters, they're now doing live streaming. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then Mystic Mac 413, how about merchandise? In my travels, not a big seller, but it depends. As always, it's a podcast question. Any kind of meme or inside joke. I remember the one, it was a LGBTQ plus show, and somebody left them a 1-star review, and it was some sort of somewhat offensive word, blah, blah, blah. And they took that 1-star review, took a screenshot and turned it into a t-shirt. So it was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm going to wear this with pride now. If you have any kind of catchphrase or something, there was somebody I interviewed and they had just found, there was something about a chocolate banana. And I don't know, I didn't even want to go what that really meant. It was some sort of inside joke. And so they made a t-shirt, and here's the thing. They made it limited availability. If you want it, get them before they run out, which is stupid because you're using Printful and they're not going to run out. But it's like, hey, get them before, they're only on sale from now till the end of February. So if you want your chocolate banana shirt, and they sold a fair amount because you got that fear of missing out thing going on.
Yeah, and on merch, I would say start small. I think a lot of folks make the mistake of trying to offer, okay, we're going to do t-shirts and hoodies and mugs and pens and paper. And, you're like, okay, in the early days of your merch, start small. Just do one thing or a few things and make it limited so you don't lose your shirt on this thing. And see what the appetite is for that, kind of test those waters out. I watched this YouTuber that the name of the channel is Outdoors with the Morgans. And it's literally just a guy. He's retired. Actually, YouTube now is his profession. And all he does is 2 videos a week of all the things he does on he's got kind of a multi-acre property, and he cuts wood and builds things, and it's just his life. He's just sharing his life. But they started selling hoodies and shirts first, and then he realized he found a supplier who sold fire starter. Fire starter. This is just chips of wood soaked in some kind of
Right.
flammable, right, to help you start your fire. It's it's chips of wood, right?
Right.
So he starts making it available. Mike is his name, Mike Morgan. He starts selling this. He can't keep it. He cannot keep it in stock. They they bring it in for whatever reason. The niche within his audience, you know,
Right.
it makes sense, right? These are people who burn a lot of wood and
Yeah.
do things like that, right? And he gets to the point where he has to start offering it. He has to get on the program and say, "I'm sorry that we're out of fire starter. Like we're getting more." He's got a source of it there in Pennsylvania. We're going to get more. Well, it's kind of begun to dominate the channel, and he's showing on his channel how they package. He had to buy equipment to package,
Yeah.
put labels on it, sell, box it. Part of him part of his channel now is showing how he's selling merch like
Wow.
it's an inception. It's a merch inception, right? So you never, would I have ever in a million years? I mean, I buy my fire starter and these little chip things at Menards. I never would have
Right.
thought that to buy it from a YouTuber, right? But you never, with your audience, you never know. And so start small, give it a try. If it goes gangbusters, go a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
It's just business. It's just business, friends. Just go a
Yep.
little bit bigger, go a little bit bigger. Just be careful. I think sometimes the tendency is we have immediate success, so we go all in on the second one, and then
Right.
it doesn't quite always do as well as we
What
think.
what's the name of
Uh,
that show? The guy with the fire starter?
outdoors. Do you want to buy some fire starter?
I do.
Have I intrigued you? Yeah, outdoors with the Morgans is the name of that on
Hmm.
YouTube. Mike, it's very fascinating. It's just a vlog. It's an
Right.
old school vlog. He's always doing is filming what he does every day. You get a couple days worth, and then he puts 2 videos out a week. I listen. This is a guy. I'd sit down and drink a cup. I don't know if he drinks beers, but I drink a couple beers with him if he
Yeah.
I why am I attracted to that? It's just where it's just where I'm at in my life, right?
Yeah.
It gives me, he's doing some cool stuff I don't want to do, but I like watching, and so it works. But that's a merch story. That's one I've been thinking a lot about, is watching his success. I
Well,
watched him launch this fire starter, and I was like, what are you doing, Mike? It's chips of wood soaked in some kind of flammable
right.
thing that you like.
Well,
Come on, I buy these at Menards. Like,
the beauty of it is it's proof of concept.
yeah,
When you start, because I remember the guy, and this is a real show, the chameleon breeder, and he had cages made, and his audience said, "Hey, we could buy these cages from overseas a lot cheaper, but we want to buy them from you. It's the whole law of reciprocity. You've given us so much." Because it turns out there's not a lot of people doing podcasts about chameleon breeding, and they wanted to give back. And so he said, "Yeah." He goes, My supplier said, "Can you kind of like ixnay on the promoting the cages thing?" And I said, "Dude, no, you go get a different supplier." I go, either or get a second one and make sure they're making them to the right spec or whatever. I go, but that's proof of concept. You don't slow down. You found something that works. Put the gas on that thing and let it go. So, yeah. Brad asks, any take on the Captivate version of Patreon? Here's the thing that's interesting. I have my book, Profit from Your Podcast. God, it's one of those days, isn't it? As an
wait a minute,
audio
you
book.
wrote a book?
I know. On Soundwise. In fact, that's one of the things when my voice comes back, I need to wrap that up because everybody that bought it before the end of January, actually before the end of, anyway, they're going to get a shout out. Early buyers get a shout out at the end of the book. And it's on Soundwise because I got it on AppSumo. But, and this could also work, just to be fair, on Buzzsprout, because you could have a podcast on Buzzsprout or Captivate. Don't list it anywhere. Make it private, make all the episodes private, and then with Captivate, you could basically sell that book, and when they buy it, they get access to these bonus episodes. Well, all the episodes are bonus episodes, and you could basically, I think with Captivate, you have to copy and paste the RSS feed, where Buzzsprout you don't. That's one difference, but it's just, if I remember right, it's 12%, so it's very Buzzsprout and Captivate are both in that 12 to 14% range. So they're kind of the upper range of Patreon. The nice thing, it's all in one place, So that's the bonus of it. But I tried it once on the podcast rodeo show, and that's just a show that was not. It's weird. People loved it, but yet when it came to, I had it to where episodes after 6 months, I think I went in and set them to where you had to pay to listen to them, and I didn't give it a lot of time to really test that. But I never had somebody, because there were 15 shows that were free, or you could get access to the other whatever 100 shows that were paid, and everybody's like, no, I'm good with just the free 15. And then Craig said, I'd be nervous about moving to another service. Well, right now, if you go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, you will see that if you sign up, you're signing up with Supercast, which what happens is, because I didn't go to everybody on Patreon and say, hey, we're moving. I kind of hinted at it. I'm like, hey, if you want to give me another 4%, you could move over here. But right now, Randy Black from Bible Bites is the only person on Supercast. So I just upload it twice, is the thing. If you move, and to me, uploading, at this point, I've put everything into Patreon. So I just upload the file, go into Patreon, copy my show notes, paste it into Supercast, and we're good to go. Ralph said I added a Buy Me a Coffee, and I've got close to 700 episodes. I honestly did it just because a few people asked me if they could support the show. So yeah, when do I start monetizing? When people go, hey, how can I give you money? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really it. And then there are people like John. Mr. Jamango says, podcast costs me about $200 a month. I consider it a hobby. If I was a golfer, I would spend more than that on the greens fee. Yeah, it's golf, and I did a thing once in a presentation. I looked at golf, bowling, and I forget the other hobby, but I spend at least $100 a year on my bike just to get it tuned up and new tires if I need them, and brakes and that kind of stuff. Tanner, the man that kicked this off, Supercast and Patreon are the front runners. I also do courses and books. I love that Podpage has the course and storefront. Yeah, all that is, it's funny because you could link to courses and books on Podpage before. We just made the button for you, basically. And so check out, I believe it's Pine. I want to say Pinecast, but that's not it. For selling courses, it's weird because it's $29 a month for that versus, Teachable, or I'm using Zenler, which is $60 a month. But it's one of those where I'm like, you talk about moving stuff. If you're doing courses and you move to a new platform, that is no fun. I cannot find that anywhere. Links in the show notes when I get done with the show, because I typed in Pine and that's not it. Brad might remember if he's still on, because I talked about it a lot at the School of Podcasting, but it is escaping me now because I'm full of Sudafed and Airborne.
You're doing pretty good, Dave, for being all hopped up on cold medication. You're doing great.
Yeah. We do have some other questions. Dan made this great point about growing your audience. No one likes to hear that there's an element of luck to it all.
No, for sure.
But it is true. I did.
And you can manufacture that luck sometimes, right? I mean, luck is where hard work meets opportunity.
Yep.
And so you can manufacture that in some ways by working hard. Like it's not a requirement, right? Because you can not do anything and get lucky still. Like that opportunity can still come your way. You still might find that $100 bill as you're walking out of the store, right? That's lucky. But if you put yourself, and that analogy breaks down pretty quick, but if you put yourself in some situations with a lot of hard work where that opportunity might arise, right? The more episodes you have out there, the better quality that they are, the more networking that you do. Any one of those things doesn't guarantee it, but it does put you in the right place for that luck to happen. And so you again, this is the crazy thing about it, is you can do all this work and get nothing, or you could do no work and get something. It's probably going to be something in between, just to be honest, right? Generally, a lot of hard work pays off, and generally, people who do nothing don't get anything. We always tend to focus on the extremes, on this thing, where our brains kind of go, yeah, well, but that guy didn't do anything and he got so lucky. Okay, it was one person, 17 people get struck by lightning a year. It just happens. But that being said, I think you can, Dave. You can sometimes you can manufacture, and I'm putting in air quotes, you can manufacture that luck just with a lot of hard work. Guarantee? No. Does it give you better opportunities? Yes. Even gambling, the more you do it, the better your odds are in some cases. If you don't gamble, you're never going to win it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
now, I'm not advocating for gambling. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but that's one of those, situations where you got to put some effort in.
that's it. Jeff says also people are afraid to ask. The worst a company can say to you is no if
Yeah.
you pitch a
Yeah.
sponsorship. I got to tell you this though. Do I name? Nah, I won't name the company. But I'm setting up the booth, and somebody walks by. Hey, we're neighbors, and blah blah blah. And they're like, "Do you need this?" And I'm like, "Actually, I've been thinking about buying your product." And they're like, "Great." And then the one lady, they played good cop, bad cop, and the bad cop lady started to pitch me, and I go, "Yeah, I'm kind of like, this is not a good time." I go, I'm like, I'll see you later in the show though, but I'm like, nah.
Right.
And so then good cop came back and was like, great, whatever. Bad cop pitches me again. Long story short, the fourth pitch, because the third pitch, I go, I don't mean to be rude. I go, I don't mean to shut you down. I go, but this is not a good time to pitch me. And then she pitched. That was the third time. And the fourth time, I said, you are this close to losing an absolute sale. I go,
Yeah.
I do not want to be pitched. I don't want to be rude. I do not want to be pitched now. Listen to your future customer. And so, yeah, that was
Right.
pick your time.
I have an anti-pitch built into me, and the second I sense it, it can be something I've been thinking about buying for years.
Yeah.
As soon as I get a hardcore sales pitch, I'm like, I don't want it anymore. I'm not I'm not interested. I don't it's the weirdest thing that's part of my personality is I just don't, and maybe that's everybody. I don't know, Dave. Maybe that's everybody. I just don't like the pitch. And or maybe it's a bad pitch, right? Maybe that's or like in your case, maybe it's an overdone pitch. Like read your audience, friend.
Yeah.
But maybe she's been very successful doing that, right? There are folks I've bought things from people who've been very insistent, and eventually you're like, okay, I'll just buy it.
Yeah.
For you to get out of my
Yeah.
house, right? Whatever. So
Yeah, I did buy, I forget what it was, but I bought something under that circumstance and hated that person after that. I was like, I bought this, I don't need it. It's way too much money.
Yeah.
And I had a contract for like 6 months, and I was like, you stink,
Yeah, just as soon as I feel a sales pitch, I just am like, peace out. I don't. This is the like my philosophy in guests. Oftentimes is you don't ask me, I ask you.
Ryan.
And so if somebody comes to me and they start pitching, and you can kind of feel it, right? Like, I have this now if someone like someone from this community who's listened to me for a while,
Right.
who would send me a note and say, Jeff C did this. He would, in fact, Jeff, let's see if we can connect, because I need to have you back on the show. But Jeff C contacted me. He's like, hey, I heard you say on the show you were getting into this. I've been doing that. Would that be a good fit to be on the show? Well, okay, yeah. I mean, I have a relationship at that point, right? As a listener here, they know who I am. But just somebody out of the blue, and they're like, this is why I would be good. I struggle with that. I shut down. I'm like, no, not gonna do it. So I don't know why. That's probably not important content for this show, but thanks for letting me say it.
Well, no, there's a time to pitch and a time to listen,
Yeah.
Stephanie says, I want to host an artist meetup in March. I should start promoting it now. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't have to do the Chris Krimitsos thing where he promotes it about, I don't know, 9 months out of the year and starts flying around the country. But you can't wait till the last minute, because people need to plan, and sometimes, especially if they're going to use their vacation, things like that. Chris Stone from castahead.net. I use the Captivate private feed for one of my clients, and it works seamlessly. This is that extra paste RSS step, which loses a few people, but a great option. Yeah, plus it works with Zapier. I don't put a lot down it, but I have a private feed for the School of Podcasting. And so when somebody signs up at Zenler, Zapier says, oh, add them to this private podcast. And then it emails them that, hey, here's how you get your stuff. So going back to DR's question, or no, this was for you, Jim. Let me take this other one first, and then we'll do that. What would I change about Podfest in 2025? The only thing, now here's the thing. New CEO, and Nick is awesome, by the way. I met that guy in person for the first time, and really went the extra mile in a way. I always love having, the paper thing from the event, right? And they were out of them. And it was like, oh, and Nick's like, hold on. He goes, we might have one in the back office or whatever. And he went and got me one. And I know it sounds stupid, but it's a little thing. But it was like the fact that I wanted one, he's like, I'll find one. So that was cool. But they raised their prices on stuff. And my guess is, because Chris is he's a community guy, wants to help everybody, maybe not making a huge profit margin on Podfest. I don't know. I literally have no idea. But they raised their prices on some stuff. I know if you wanted to sponsor a party, I heard somebody say that was a lot more than it used to be. I know as a speaker, you didn't get a full ticket. You got the next to the bottom. Like there was the just get me in the door ticket, and then there was one, that's the ticket you got. You didn't get like a VIP ticket, which I personally thought was a mistake, because don't you want your speakers at the VIP events so that people can mingle with the speakers? I don't know. That was my thought. But in terms of changing, I wouldn't change much, because they do a really good job. As a vendor, they do a really good job of sending traffic to you. So that's that. I would, and I'm only saying this from two people. I heard, wow, there's a lot of pitching from the stage. So I would go back and listen to those recordings and flag people who are selling. There are some, like Larry Roberts, the Red Hat guy. It's well known. This is a paid thing. You're going to a paid thing, and Larry is going to pitch you. And it's at the very end of the event. So that's nothing against Larry. Like hey, you're going to get pitched. We're going to talk about AI, but at the end, I'm going to pitch you my AI stuff. So I'm not talking about that. But, and I don't know, nobody named names, but I just heard there was a bit of pitching. So that would be the one thing I think I would go back and watch. And really every event should do that, because nobody likes to sit through a pitch. And then while we're still talking about conferences, how long has Jared Easley been gone from PM? Not very long. Nobody knows the story on that. I even asked Gary Leland, and Gary Leland's like, I'm not really involved with podcast movement anymore. I just know Jared reached out to me, and if you need a Jared, I asked him, I'm like, dude, what do you do? I would be like, he's connected with me with so many people. Talk about the law of reciprocity. This guy's helped so many people that in fact, now that I'm back, I need to kind of text him or something and say, dude, how can I help? Because I don't know who left who or what the deal was. But yeah, Jared is no longer working for Podcast Movement. And I think it's up to, us to like help him find a job, something somewhere. Cause he's a great guy, and has a really big heart. And I was kind of sad to hear that, cause that's, it is what it is. So now, I don't know if do you need to get your nerd on?
No, but let's thank our supporters.
Let's thank our awesome supporters. Well,
then we'll cover that on the back side.
Yeah. So you can be an awesome supporter by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, and you'll see all the people over there. Check out their shows and click on their links. But the show is also brought to you by theschoolofpodcasting.com, where you get online courses step by stepping you through things. You've got an awesome community, and my favorite, unlimited coaching. In fact, I use an app that lets me send text messages, audio or video to people. And I was having conversations every day. I would wake up and be like, oh, Kenny's got another question. And so that's part of it. And they're like, oh, I thought it was one-on-one on Zoom. No, we do that unless Dave's at Podfest. But that worked really well last week. So use the coupon code COACH when you sign up at schoolofpodcasting.com. And we're using Podpage. Big news on Monday, by the way. Especially if if you like newsletters, you're going to like what happens on Monday at Podpage. You can check it out at trypodpage.com. Very excited for that feature, by the way. That's been requested a lot. And we mentioned Ecamm earlier. Check them out. askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm. And I saw a video on their beta, and they're going to start adding not so much where I can bring in my VST effects, but they're going to have audio effects. So if you want a compressor or an EQ, you're going to be able to kind of tweak that live, which I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I haven't finished watching that, but hey, if you need more Jim Collison, and who doesn't, well, then just go over to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And it is time, and this time we're doing this on the screen because I couldn't get things to work. So hopefully you see the wheel of names. Is that correct, Jim?
I do see it. I do see it. Yes, correct.
So will it be Randall Black or Jody Krangle? I got to see Jody Krangle. We kind of said hi and talked there was a lot of that at the show where I saw people, we'd wave, we're like, we got to catch up later. And then we didn't. So it could be Ed Sullivan at Sonic Cupcake, Greg at Indie PodCon. There's Ross Brand. They're all there. Craig at AI Goes to College, who is going to be the featured supporter of the week. And you go at I talked to Glenn about this. He's like, do you have the wheel rigged? He goes, why do I keep winning? And I go,
Woo-hoo.
I don't know. But our featured supporter is Glenn the Geek. You guys saw, I just clicked randomly from Horse Radio Network. He's got some sort of magic voodoo going on that he keeps winning. But if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, you can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And you don't have to spend $20. We also have $10 and $5 if you just like, I do want to support this because, hey, you know what? You save me time, you save me money, you save me headaches, and you keep me educated and maybe even a little entertained. Just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. So we appreciate that. And then do we need to play the jingle for this?
Well, because I want to hear the kids. I want to hear the kids.
We want to hear the kids? All right.
I want to hear the kids.
It means it's that time, kids.
And now, oh, he's been waiting for this. It's time for Jim to get his nerd on.
And this is from DR.
It just makes my heart happy.
Except I clicked on the wrong one.
Oh, it's okay.
But basically, she was asked.
I made a comment earlier about less podcasts. I believe there are less podcasts about technology or tech podcasts today than there were in the past. And she's asking me, why do you think that? When I started tech podcasting about 14 years ago now, I guess, there was most of the podcasts were tech, they were just tech podcasts. Now, from a percentage standpoint, I think in those days, they probably represented a good number of the podcasts that were available. Technology people were more adept to doing podcasting. They knew how to work the equipment and do the stuff. It required computers and powerful stuff and all those other pieces. And so just those two kind of went together. But with the proliferation of podcasting gear, that's easier to do, and the tech has really changed. I mean, in 2007, I don't think enough people realize what happened to the PC in 2007. When the iPhone was released, PC numbers dropped drastically, and they've been dropping. Right now, we all still, we work and we have PCs, but we don't. It's not like the days of old when everybody had a PC that was their only way to connect to the internet, and if you wanted to do anything, you had to do it on your PC. We are quickly moving into a world, or have moved into a world, where most people are really consuming 100% of their social media or whatever they're doing on their phones. And we just don't see that. And then there's just not, there's podcasts out there about how to do phones, but the phone operating systems and that kind of technology, it's just way better. The days of Windows 95 and Windows 98 and then Windows 2000, those were terrible days to try to do things. That operating system was awful. It was, for most people, it was hard. It was glitchy. You needed people to help you with your tech. So there was that kind of stuff was out there.
Mm.
We've come a long way from that. Most folks who own a PC today or a Mac are power users. And so they just know how to do things. They just don't need the help that they used to. The average guy, so to speak, with the brand there, I don't know, below me, the average
There you
guy
go.
who I try to talk to has moved on from some of those things. Are there tech topics like home automation, some of those kinds of things that are interesting that people need help with? Yes. They're consuming it differently. My tech podcast is more of a variety show than it is a how-to show. A lot of the how-to stuff is moved to YouTube, right? From in a traditional sense of it fits nicely in with that. So that's DR. That's a long explanation, probably one people have just fast forwarded through. But that's why I just think when I say that, like, I just think there's less of what I do that's out there. Now that's good for me in some regards. For people looking for those kinds of shows, I'm out there doing it. I'm still out there doing it. And so people can if they want to come and listen to a personality and people talk about it in, we say, news, reviews, product updates, and conversation, that's our space. That's what we do. I think there's less of those.
And I think that situation of, I don't understand this, I need help, that is now AI. That's where people,
It's for sure.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, there's
for sure. Yeah,
one of
it's
our
gonna
awesome,
be even
one of
more.
our awesome supporters is AI Goes to College. But I know Mike Russell has a YouTube channel, and just every week he's like, "Here's more tools," and I was like, "I haven't played with the ones from last week, but
Uh,
that is
yeah,
something that needs a." But you ready for a quick tangent? Just talking
yeah,
about where
for
we
sure,
were.
for sure.
So I didn't sleep at all last night. It's, you do the whole 45-minute session until you have to flip and let your nose run to the other side. And so I woke up this morning and I asked Spotify, I go, "Hey, play I Didn't Sleep at All Last Night," which is a song by Billy Somebody. It's from the 50s. It is so 1950. It's hilarious because they even do the bum, 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 bum in the middle, but at the end, he mentioned something about the milkman. And
Hmm.
I was like, I have not thought about, and I mean, it's really blurry, but I remember having this little silver box outside of our door, and the milkman would put milk in that. I don't know why, but I
Yeah.
was just thought, okay, I barely remember the milkman. I barely remember black and white TV. It just makes me wonder by the time I get up here and I'll be like, back in the day, and that'll just be my voice. It'll just, where we're going. So it's, when you think about, I remember Windows 3.1, and the first time
Oh,
I
for
grabbed a
sure.
mouse and couldn't control it. I was like, wait, what do you do with it? So it's going to be fun to see where podcasting ends up when we all listen via the chip in our head. So um, that'll be
Yeah,
fun.
that's a
Um,
good. It's like that's a really good question. When we think, I don't think any of us know or
no.
are describing what the future is going to look like. We think we do, but I don't think we do. I think there's going to be some interesting things coming with it.
Yeah, every time I see something, like there are now Beatle videos. People are taking Beatles songs and making a video with, at times, fairly lifelike versions of the Beatles singing a song. And it even says, like, Norwegian Wood, AI generated video, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, okay. And they've taken, like, the one, they've just took pictures and made them come to life. And I was like,
Yeah,
so the
yeah.
whole time I'm like, well, this is cool and spooky. And I've got my popcorn and I'm going to sit here and watch. I do want to do a shout out. Deal Billy, I met at the Ecamm Creator Camp, and we said, "Oh, I want to bring you on. Yeah, so reach out to me at School of Podcasting or something of that nature, because I want to have." Deal Billy is a guy that is just crushing on, I believe, if I remember right, Amazon and YouTube, because he does all these videos for products and demos them, and then as an affiliate and blah blah blah. But he started some of this. Not but apparently I am somewhat responsible for a small part of what he's doing, as is Glenn the Geek. So I said, you know what, we should have Glenn the Geek and me interview Billy about what he's up to. And so when he popped in, I was like, oh yeah, we should make that happen. So, oh man, Dan brings it in. It's probably best we forget about Windows Me.
Yeah, the Millennial Edition. Yeah, it is probably best that we forget about those. By the way, just since we're on the tech space,
Yeah.
let me throw this in really fast as we think about this. Is my contribution of actual tech news. If you're a Windows user, chances are you're probably on your Windows 10 or maybe 11. Windows 10 support ends October 2025. So now I don't know if Microsoft's going to actually hold to that. Their history is that that's 10 years since it's crazy to think it's been out that long, right? But they may or may not bend on that. But let's just say if you're still on Windows 10, you're going to probably lose support. That means updates aren't going to show up anymore for your PC. If it's an old PC and it requires it doesn't have TPM 2.0, which is what's required for Windows 11, in a few other things. You have to have a supported processor. You can't upgrade it. That's not totally true. You can go on YouTube and actually watch some videos with 2 steps and some downloads. You can actually do it. You can get to Windows 11 if you want to upgrade your PCs. You can reach out to me if you got questions on that. I just did that for a couple PCs here. If you're moving to Windows 11, that's like the newest versions, the 24H2 update for that. That's the newest update that's been coming along down that. If you're following along and keeping your updates, it's the quality on that's a little rough. So if you can hold off on your updates for a little bit, let
Yeah.
Microsoft get ahead on some of those kinds of things. Maybe not a bad idea. If you've bought a new computer in the last year, most likely you're on Windows 11. Most likely you have
Yeah.
all the things that you need. But the newest update that came out for Windows 11, it has a lot of changes to it, and you may see some issues. You may not. I haven't seen any on mine, but you may or may not. If you can hold off on updates for a little while, you might want to. Sometimes it's good to just delay it a little bit if you can. You may not see any updates either, but that the world of Windows is certainly one where nobody's talking about that for the most part. I mean, we all have Windows computers. I think a lot of us do. Although as podcasters, we may have more Macs than the average from a population standpoint. But
Y-
yeah, certainly
Yeah.
some things going on.
The thing about a Mac is I'll be in a Google Meet and I'll want them to share their screen. And because of Mac security, they have to go in and change their settings and blah, blah. So I ask people now, like, are you on a Mac? And a lot of them say yes, but if they're not, it's much easier. And it's not a big deal. You just have to go in and say yes, allow, whatever. But it's always like, oh, just share
Yeah,
your screen. They're like, I'm on a Mac. I'm like, stupid,
yeah,
like security, keeping people safe. What are you doing? Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So,
holy cow.
Randy, were you going to bring up Randy's?
I was going to bring up
Ra-
this. DR
oh,
gave
yeah,
us a
yeah.
super chat. So thank you so much for that. She says, it feels good to get back in the swing of things. Thanks for the education. Well, thank you, DR. We appreciate that. What is Randy's thing?
Randy says Microsoft is force installing the new Outlook into Windows 10 and 11 PCs next month. That's true. If you don't want it, you can't stop it. That's true as well.
Wow.
You can uninstall it, but you need to edit the registry to make that work again. Yeah, I would. Listen. I don't think the new Outlook is spyware or anything. For most
Right.
people, they'll never notice the difference. I'm not saying it's right what they're doing. Because I could easily say Mac does this all the time. Just to be honest, they don't give you any choices in a lot of ways. Like, no, we're unsupporting this thing. The software they're replacing is literally 1,000 years old. Like these are, and they're not going to update. They don't want to update it. They want something new in there, right? Again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, Randy, on that. Some people feel different. I think I would be more concerned about the new recall features that are coming with Windows that they
Mm.
announced a while back, and there was a huge uproar about that. Basically, they're taking a screenshot, Dave, of what you're doing every 10 seconds, something like that. And then if you want to, yeah, exactly. If you want to, and it's all secure. Okay, I'm putting these in quotes. It's all secure. It's only on your computer. It's backed up with it's secured with BitLocker, so it's tied to your login. Nobody else can see it. So some of those kinds of things, I'm a little skeptical on this one. But you can, in theory, if you want to be like, hey, I was on a website and I can't remember what that was. You could go into Recall, drag through the screen to see where it's at, and then click on it, and it would take you there. Now, as of today, only available on Copilot Plus PCs. You'd had to especially bought this to make this kind of thing work. But this is one of those areas, right? For most people, they've kind of forgotten to even keep up with any of this stuff anymore. And there's tons of things going on behind the scenes, especially on the Microsoft side, of things you may want to pay attention to, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's we sometimes we set it and forget it. We used to talk about this stuff all the time, but not as much anymore. But yeah.
Randy says literally 1,000 years.
Yeah.
He goes, that may not be entirely accurate.
That is 100% accurate. I checked it before the
1,025. That was back when.
Hey, we live in a world you can just say
That's right.
You can say anything you want and it's true. So
it's the biggest, it's the best, it's wonderful. Yes.
I don't want to get political, but
no.
Listen, if you're a Windows user on a regular basis, might be a good time to pay attention just over the next 6 months or so to what's going on, to make sure you get what you want and you know what you're doing with your computing device.
And if you thought clearing your browsing history was enough,
no,
maybe not.
Maybe not true. Maybe true. Maybe not. Maybe it depends on your computer and what you bought and what you have and what it's doing. Listen, Microsoft is making a big investment in AI, right? They made a giant investment into OpenAI, and they are doing a lot of things. They want you, and they are I think they're the world's leader in AI compute right now. Yeah. They want to include these services. You're going to see a lot more of that coming up in Windows. Yeah. I listen, I don't want to get political. I shouldn't have said that.
That's sorry. All right. That's my fault.
No, it's all right.
Todd says, I think the trend for podcasting is building a community alongside your podcast. It doesn't work for everyone, but I've seen many examples of it. It's not a set it and forget it. Yeah. And he was also saying how there are things in his video software he still needs to learn. And that is anytime, because Tanner says, I'm fighting moving on to YouTube. Editing audio is hard enough without adding video. And again, I always say, if you don't want to go on YouTube, don't go on YouTube. That will,
Listen, I don't know if that's true anymore, by the way. That editing video is harder than editing audio.
That's true.
I don't know if that's true anymore.
If you're using Descript, it's not.
Right. Yeah. And there's some really good tools to help with that.
And you can't really, well, you can if you don't want to do it, but like the algorithm, it's hard to ignore that. And I'm like, and it's kind of like we were talking about earlier with the lottery. If you're not on YouTube, you can't get found by the algorithm. So, it'll be interesting to see how that's going to work out in the long run. But we will see.
Dan says Microsoft's bringing back 3 Mile Island again. If you haven't kept up with the news, what we closed 3 Mile Island decade, 15, 20 years ago, something like that, right? I mean, it had a reactor accident. It was the first, I think it was one of the first ones here in the United States. I can't remember. I may have some of those details wrong. They shut one down, one ran for a while, then they were like, hey, this nuclear power thing's not working. Well, AI needs so much power. Microsoft is like, hey, we don't want to build a whole nother power plant. We don't want to use fossil fuels. We'd rather just restart 3 Mile Island. So they're in negotiation right now to pay for the restart of that reactor, turn it back on, put it back on the grid, and then lease back the power that it generates. So they're gonna say, hey, we will guarantee, this is all for AI processing, by the way. We will guarantee we'll consume this much or pay for this much or whatever. It's way more complicated than that, and then you can put the extra on the grid type thing. So 79, says John. So there you go. That was a while ago. But they're gonna. I've seen videos of them going through. They're not gonna retrofit this with new stuff. Like, I'm sure there'll be some things that need to be changed and some of that kind of stuff. But they're like, if you picture the typical 70s control panels for they're gonna use them.
They still have the lime green refrigerator in the cafeteria.
You got that switch that,
but isn't it like radioactive? Like,
well, for sure it is. Yeah, for sure. I mean, they safely shut it down in 79. I mean, they took all the.
Okay, I thought they did a Chernobyl and just let it burn down.
No. The other reactor has been, the one that went critical has been closed down and sealed off and all those other things. This is the good one. They're going to restart the good one and use I think there's 2 reactors there. So yeah, if you thought life couldn't get any more interesting, that's another. Yeah, and Coach Dave says, and crypto mining. That is true. I mean, like
Yeah.
our all of a sudden AI has added and crypto too have added an enormous
Yep.
strain on the power grid,
That's
and
what I
so
hear. And isn't that what, again, without getting political, there's something 500 million thing with Oracle and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
OpenAI.
Yep,
And
yep.
it's all about power.
500 billion, not million, but $500 billion
So
they pledged
yeah,
to add. Well, I mean, so now you have Oracle, Google's in this space as well, adding to the AI grid, needing power, right? This AI stuff takes enormous of. Yeah, Craig, what could possibly go wrong? Well, that's we're in for however you feel about that. I mean, it is progress in some ways. There's some folks, I mean, you gotta, you don't want a Chernobyl in your backyard, right?
yeah, me neither.
Or Fukushima, right? I mean, so both of those, all that stuff runs its risk. It does highlight though the enormous amount of and John good. John jumped in. He said there's 3 reactors are going to restart 2, right? With the one being the one that caused the problem. Um, we've this AI is more than just fancy rewriting or summarizing of your text, right? Or writing show notes for you. I mean, there's at least for right now, there's a huge money being put in this. The question will be, will it pay off? I mean, these companies that are spending this money, talk about trickle down economics. These companies that are spending this money are putting $500 billion over the next 4 years. That's a lot of money to dump into the economy
Yeah.
so there's going to be, of course, these companies, in some cases, these companies have this money. Microsoft has I mean, Dave, they could never do anything again and continue to, their revenues on a quarterly basis are counted in tens of billions of dollars every
Wow.
quarter. So, anyways,
Yeah.
lots coming with AI. I think that's a space to pay attention to and keep your eyes on for sure, because there's a lot more coming than what we see today.
Yeah. And we're talking about editing. Chris makes a great point. Editing is less hard when you do it more. Absolutely. I use Descript once a week. I know how to go in, get it to do what I need it to do, but there's a ton of stuff that it's I use it for this show. And then DR says they give her massive shade for editing video in Canva, but it's really easy
Yeah,
and the results are pretty good. Yeah, I've done
yeah,
stuff in
yeah,
Canva with video and I
for
was like,
sure.
"Wait, what?" And I put it in there and was like, "Well, this isn't bad." We
Yeah.
use a thing at Podpage called Capwing, but that was basically just, I forget what the deal was. And that's not my favorite because we wanted a cloud-based thing so that both Brendan and I could see the stuff at the same time. But it takes a while to render video, at least in that case for that. So, but I mean, I'd not heard about 3 Mile Island. That's really weird.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's coming to a theater near you.
yeah. But yeah, do what works for you. And I still
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
not Canva, Camtasia for a lot of video stuff.
I,
Yeah.
I just think though sometimes, and not this isn't a contradiction, Chris, but I think sometimes when we think of video, we think video from 10 or 15 years ago. And we're like, oh no, I tried video editing then and it just was so hard and I just could. And it's like, well, if the
Yeah.
last time you did video editing was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, you might want to just take a quick look at it again because there's some pretty good tools and it's gotten a lot easier and our computers have gotten a lot faster and the services that, especially if you're doing it online, have gotten a lot faster and there are some AI helps for that. So all that being said, I don't think if that statement is based on an experience from 10 years ago. Maybe that's a myth today. That could be a quickly ending myth that video process or video editing is harder than audio editing.
Yeah. Well, the fun part is Todd brings up file sizes are enormous.
They
Yeah. And
are.
if you're getting into 4K, like we don't
Well,
need to see me in 4K. Like I'm good at whatever this is. But
but
yeah.
bandwidth's never been better. Like
Yeah.
Our internet speeds have never been faster. Your results may vary on your
Yeah.
location or where you're at, right? I mean, look at with the advent of Starlink and the ability to now do pretty fast internet stuff, pretty much anywhere in the United States, anyways. And there again, your mileage might vary, and I'm sure some Starlink customers who had bad experiences will email us. That's Dave at schoolofpodcasting.com.
Right.
Uh, but we've never had better. Bandwidth continues to get better. Equipment continues to get better. Some of the stuff, as we think about what's coming out with computer hardware, some really good stuff is on. I mean, just the Mac Mini M4 that I just bought is an amazing device in a box that big.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Well,
it's incredible. So.
And Chris points out storage is cheap these days. It's ridiculous. You can get, terabyte drives that, are next to nothing. Dan says, in my honest opinion, the biggest difference with video is introducing graphics, titles, etc. Yeah, I want to play with it, but there's a part of me that goes, is that? And it's an AI tool for making YouTube thumbnails. And what it does is it will go out and basically find a really popular video and kind of, let's say it will the resulting image will be inspired by that. And by that, I mean, they just copy the crap out of it. And I was like, that seems kind of odd, but it looked, I mean, the results that it came up with, because it's designed for one thing, and that's creating YouTube thumbnails. And I want to say it was like $20-$30. And I was like, I don't need another $20 subscription. Last thing we should point out, I'm not going to say who this was, but a big name in his space, because I have this person's software, announced that he's going bankrupt.
Oh.
And in a nutshell,
darn.
He basically, because he's the kindest, sweetest guy you'd ever want to meet, and bought himself a big old team and did all this stuff, tried to kind of do everything.
Yeah.
And in the end, I don't know who was watching the books, but they're like, and then I think there's more to this story because he's, can I say that? He's got some health issues. And I think some medical bills might have come, but all of a sudden he was like, because I wondered what was going on, because his team, everything was always top notch. And I'd emailed him and said, hey, I canceled this like a couple months ago and I'm still getting dinged. And I got nothing. So what they did is they can't refund because everything's been frozen. Yeah. And they said, you have access to this tool that you don't want for like another couple months. Basically, they gave me free months of a service that I didn't want. And I kind of get why. It's not really what I was looking for, but I just say that because, as much as we say run this like a business, if you are spending money and, it's an expensive hobby, but you might want to do a couple, like, how much am I making? 0. How much am I spending? Oh, I didn't realize I was spending that much. And it really just kind of boils down to his heart took over instead of his brain. And I was like, be careful with that, because you can make some really bad, I'm still paying for some really bad decisions that I've made over the past. And so,
okay, cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
Bad decisions. Well, like in this case, you didn't know, right? I mean,
no, and
that wasn't a bad decision when you made it. Right?
Yeah. DR asked if this is from AppSumo. No, this was, it's kind of a big name if in his space again. And I've bought every product he's ever bought. It's really good stuff. And except this one, he made an AI tool that helped you, like every other AI tool, you put it in and it helps you write. Like if you think about CapShow is an AI tool that helps you write show notes with a marketing slant. And then you'll have, here's an AI tool that helps you write this with a whatever slant, and then this slant. So they're all kind of doing the same thing. It's just that they basically put in a profile to kind of have the writing be not biased, but definitely have a slant towards, my brain's just not working today.
No, you're doing great.
Yeah, right towards
you're doing fine.
Yeah, Ralph says, I want to have enough spec.
He's responding to, I'd asked for some specs for his he just bought the new Apple Pro, the 48 gig
Yeah.
version, and so that was his response to it. You can still read it. It just makes more sense.
Well, the nice thing about, we were talking about this at the School of Podcasting, is when you buy an Apple product, it's going to hang around a bit. If you load that thing up, it's going to be a while before. Like I don't know how long I've had my Mac Mini, probably a couple of years at this point, and that thing's churning along and hasn't sputtered once.
Yeah. No, you're going to be. I debated, but in this, because I was on the M1 too. I bought that 3 years ago, and I thought, no, I'm going to go to the M4. It's time to upgrade. I'm going to keep this. My Windows boxes, I don't upgrade as fast now anymore, but this was one of the next jumps of like, Ed Sullivan and I talk about this all the time. And it's like, yeah, I think it's time. And the pricing was actually very, very reasonable. I got the 32 gig standard with a half a terabyte of storage, and it works perfectly for me. That was the perfect. I just wanted more RAM. I'm going to run some local LLMs, some local AI. This is a project I've been working on using LM Studios, and I want to get familiar with the backends and some of the things. You don't get the most current AI that way, but that's what I wanted to do. And so I wanted to run it on the Mac because many of those models are optimized for the Mac, and there's a lot of cool things happening in that space. So I bought maybe a little more. I didn't quite go to Ralph's level,
right?
But I bought enough that I could push it. I could push it hard, and so it was a use case for me. Am I going to sell those or do anything with them? Probably not. But that's the tech space I wanted to be in. So it's a good little machine. I'm not going to lie. It was a good call.
It is.
Yeah.
And Jim, what is coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Yeah, I am on a 3-week break. Like I've never purposefully taken this much time off, right? But a lot of things going on at work, and I just thought, you know what? I've got a break in there. I'm going to take it. So yeah, I've been kind of hanging out, taking some time off, which is kind of nice. I think you need to do that from time to time just to, reset. If you need vacations from work, sometimes you need a vacation from your podcast. So taking some time off.
Or if you find yourself sick as a dog, that would be
for sure.
another time to take time off.
Except you've got that crazy weekly streak going that you can't miss. So
I should, but I'm not. But yeah, on the School of Podcasting, I'm going to take my presentation that I did at Podfest and talk about editing. Not so much what's the best tool, but how do you know what to keep? And the one thing that I kind of did a quick poll, and people feel that they worry that the guest is going to come back and listen to the episode. And I said, well, at least for me, I come back and I listen how I was introduced, and that's about it because, well, I was there. I know what I said. And I kind of listened to see if they de-ummed me because often I am a machine. But so we'll be talking about that on Monday's show. And thanks for everybody coming out today. Thanks to Mark over at podcastbranding.co and Dan at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. And you're going to hear me in a second say this, but if you ever have a question and you can't attend live and you're listening to this in your car, just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/voicemail because, we use Podpage and you can leave your question there and we will answer it in a future show. So thanks for everybody for showing up, and we will see you next week with another fun-filled episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.